and welcome to this evening's gathering. This is a board workshop, so there will be no business conducted here. Workshops are an opportunity for us to hear from our staff and get updates on things that are happening and perhaps discuss among ourselves what's going on in our district and where we want to go. So we're going to talk about family and community partnerships and about our culture and climate. And I will turn it over to our superintendent, Dr. Leslie Torres Rodriguez, and her staff.
Thank you, Chairman Flores, and good evening, everyone. We are going to have our board workshop, and specifically, while we're covering two big umbrella areas, our family and community partnerships and our culture and climate, we wanted to narrow in on some of the very specific investments that were made in the budget for this year. And so we know that when we're talking about our family and community support providers and our student engagement specialists, that's new work for us. And so we're still trying to kind of calibrate. So, you're going to get information that's actually in real time, given that a lot of this work is being implemented as we speak. So we're going to first begin with, I'm going to call Nushette Blackberg and whoever else from your team, Nushette, so that we can dive into the partnership update. And I know that we have specific groups here that are joining us. I'm so excited to see everyone here because some of you I have not met yet. And so, so good to see you all. So at some point, if you could just take a moment to highlight your team. Great.
All right, well, thank you, and there we go. Thank you, and good evening to everyone. And I do want to begin, yes, our team is with us tonight. So just want to take a moment and introduce them. So I'll start here on this end. Tamara Mitchell-Davis, she's the Assistant Director for the Office of Family and Community Partnerships. You can do the Vienna wave. Okay. Next we have Tiffany Walton, who is our Community Partnerships and Volunteer Facilitator. Hello. And Tiffany, I'm not sure if everyone knows you, so you might want to stand. Oh, great. Those are sure things. All right, thank you. And then we have Leslie Carrillo, who is our McKinney-Vento coordinator and also our displaced students coordinator. Of course, Judith Fagan, who's a veteran in the district, who is the Welcome Center director and the ombudsperson. Hello. Shelly Mar Ramirez is our Welcome Center coordinator. Hello. And Lindsay Diaz is our Community Partnerships Manager. Keishma Jones, who is our Community Schools Manager, will be joining us a little bit later. She's actively on mommy duty right now, so she'll be coming in to join us. So that's the Office of Family and Community Partnerships. That's our team. So tonight, just wanted to share some highlights from our office. There we go. All right, thank you. And so I wanted to begin, as an office, last year we spent a lot of time researching, and we had a needs assessment utilizing 4 Points Consulting, and we decided that we wanted to at least put something out to our families, the schools, and our community that really describes our office. So we developed this graphic, and it basically describes how we support our schools and the buckets of work that fall under the Office of Family and Community Partnerships. So we look at capacity building for our families through workshops, partnering with community stakeholders, and inviting partners to come in. Of course, looking at that intentional alignment, also soliciting volunteers to assist us in the work, providing technical assistance and support to our community schools. As you know, all of our schools in the district are now community schools. Supporting our families with their parent-teacher organizations and also with our school governance councils. And of course, having the Welcome Center as a place that our families can go to as they look to navigate through our district. So this graphic was created for the Office of Family and Community Partnerships. We've created posters and handouts. We pass them out in the community and also have them in our schools. And it really just gives a quick snapshot of the work that's happening in our office. So as we talk about our family and community service support providers, wanted to offer just some key highlights on that work. Last year, we appreciate the board making the investment in having family and community support providers in our schools. So we took the former role of the family resource aide and the school family support provider and really meshed them together and looked at the work that was taking place through our FRAs and the SFSPs at that time and put them together. And so what we want to highlight is the role clarity. As we looked at that role, we understood that it's a part of a larger student support team. And in collaboration with the Office of School Leadership, we created a document that kind of spells out all of those support roles. So in that support document, and I'm sure you have a copy of it, we looked at the behavior techs, student engagement specialists, family and community support service providers, and our school social workers. All right, and that document really lists out in a bulleted way what each role brings to the table and how each role supports our families and our students in the building. So that was a place that we began, is really trying to look for clarity in the role and also very intentionally look at how we can find intersections for the work. Next, we looked at how do we solidify that way of work, and again, this was really done in partnership and collaboration with the Office of School Leadership and looking at the school culture and climate. And another document that I wanted to bring to your attention was the support staff workflow. And so that support staff workflow document that you have in front of you begins with a family inquiry. So we know our families come to our schools often, they have questions, a concern, they might have an idea about something and they want to share that. So when they come in with that family inquiry, the first step would be to complete a family resource referral form. That document is still very much a draft document, a working document that we are tweaking, but that is how we would capture the request of our families. And then after that family resource form is completed, the FCSSPs, they own that document. That document belongs to them, and they would use it to really triage where the request or the concern would go. And so on the document in front of you, you'll see that there are 4 roles: the family community service support provider, the student engagement specialist, the behavior technician, as well as the school social worker, and just some examples of the types of requests that may come through a family inquiry. And the FCSSP would then take that family resource form, triage it, and ensure that it gets to the right person for a follow-up within 24 to 48 hours. So as we're working through that, it's still very much a work in progress, but wanted to bring your attention to how we envision the FCSSPs working with other support staff in the building and how other support staff are working in collaboration together. I also included a copy of the family resource referral form, and on there you can see that there are specifics as it relates to housing, if families are in a financial crisis, if they're in need of basic needs. Those are some of the pieces that are on the family resource form that they can check off. If they are self-referring and they're believing that they might need some assistance with health or mental health, they can complete this form, and the FCSSP owns that and then would work with the other support staff to ensure the need is met or the request is addressed. Another part in looking at the way of work, we also included a sample schedule for FCSSPs. This year, their role looks and feels different in the building. They report directly into the Office of Family and Community Partnerships under Tamira Mitchell-Davis's direction, but also reporting in secondarily to the school principals. So we wanted to create a sample schedule to kind of assist them with their way of work each and every day. Understanding that, of course, in a building, you want to ensure that everyone has a role and a place. So we just offered suggestions. We also shared this with school principals about how their day can actually look in the building. But really drawing attention that, of course, there would need to be intentional meetings with other support staff in the building, specific time for connecting with families, looking at how they're assessing family needs throughout the day. Intentionality around data collection. We want to make sure that data collection is happening. Again, we want to be able to show how we've worked with families and the impact of that work, and also looking at professional learning for the FCSSPs moving forward. So professional learning as an entire unit together, but also individually, if there are professional learning opportunities, they'd be able to do that. And another key highlight I wanted to bring out, and we'll spend some time going through this last point, is the Family and Community Action Plan and its alignment with the School Improvement Plan. So the Family and Community Action Plan, as a department, we have a theory of action as it relates to family and community partnerships. And the theory of action really is the foundation for the action plan. And so, as it says, if family and community partnerships is a shared responsibility between all adults in and beyond school, and then the adults are committed to building and enhancing those skills and the mindset, then our school, families, and communities engage in that productive, mutually respectful partnership. And if those partnerships focus on achieving the district goals, then family and community partnerships will be a meaningful contributor to increased student performance and greater overall social and emotional wellness. So the theory of action then takes us to the actual action plan. And the action plan, and we provided a copy, is broken up into the 4 district priority areas: teaching and learning, operational effectiveness, family and community partnerships, and school culture and climate. And when you look at the action plan, you'll see that at the top, it speaks to goals that are being assigned. And I'll read one of the goals: quality instruction and support to ensure students graduate ready for college and life. And then we look at strategies that could be implemented through the FCSSP and their work, but also looking at what lives in the school improvement plan and marrying those two together. So the example that's on the document speaks to literacy. So how do we take whatever the literacy goal is from the district, looking at that school improvement plan, and then is there a strategy that can be implemented, maybe through a community partner, maybe through a daytime intervention during the school day, that can be utilized to actualize that particular goal. And so we're asking our FCSSPs, in partnership with their principal and others in the building, to complete this family and community action plan and go through all of the steps here. Is it time-bound? Who's responsible for the work? Identify how it clearly links to the district model for excellence, and then also looking at any other resources that might be needed to ensure that it's accomplished. And so for each of the priority areas, they complete this action plan, but it has to align very closely with the school improvement plan for the building. That is what we are encouraging our FCSSPs to do. So not doing something on their own, but ensuring that whatever they're bringing into the building, however they're working with families and community partners, that it's intentional for that school and meets the need of that school. All right, so I'm going to pause right there to ask if there are any questions on this first piece before I move into another part.
I had a question on workflow, got this form. How is that communicated to the families?
Thank you. So our families, yes, they would understand, and that form would be translated also into Spanish, so it would be in both languages, but families would know that the form is there, that they can complete it. If they wanted to take the form with them, they could do that also and bring it back, but that's how it would be communicated with our families, working directly with the FCSSP to say that this form, again, it's confidential, but we want to make sure that we are addressing your need, and we also want a way to ensure that it's addressed, so we have a document to track what's happening.
Okay, more direct. How would families know?
How will families know?
Yes.
And so the how that you're asking, how will they know about the form, or how will they know that something is addressed.
How would they know that there's this forum for them to
It would be
express their
communicated-
needs?
Perfect. It will be communicated through the FCSSP. The FCSSP will need to be informing families through their sessions. We can share it with teachers, the principals in the building. That's how that communication would go out to families to let them know that this document exists that they can complete to have their need addressed.
Sure. Solid.
Thank you. So thank you, this is great. Question I have is you go back to the family inquiry. I was thinking about, so we have families who have certain issues that may be ongoing or occurring, and there are also some issues that are specific. So I'm sure that you guys probably thought that through as you were envisioning like the referrals and all of that. Also acknowledging you don't want to make these very long forms because you quickly want to be able to get them to the right place. Could you talk a little bit about that? So is it that every time a family comes, every time a family comes and is working with the FCSSP, that it potentially could be doing a form in partnership with that family member, or is it something that's kind of in their file, like we know when we work with this family, these are some of their key needs? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and thank you. Excellent question. So depending on the request or the concern, there will be situations, and excellent question, that if a family comes and it's addressed, meaning that it's acknowledged, but if it's something that's moved to, say, a school social worker, that's something that's ongoing, you are correct. So that would be an ongoing piece. So if they come again to have a conversation and they present at the school, we wouldn't be saying to them, you need to fill out a brand new form, because it's in progress. So the 24 to 48 hour turnaround time is to ensure that it gets to the correct individual, not necessarily meaning that the inquiry itself has been addressed in its entirety. Because there will be situations where it's an ongoing process. It's not going to be addressed or tied up within 24 to 48 hours.
One of the issues we hear complaints about a lot is the question of language. And I see now Shalimar and Leslie are excellent translators here. But how is that handled at the school when you have parents that come in and not proficient in English?
So that is handled, that indeed, all of our schools, there are multiple staff members that are bilingual. So you may have an FCSSP who may not speak another language, but that is the beauty of having a true support team for our students and being able to pull on someone or to ask someone to be a part of a conversation. So that is how that is handled in our schools. Visited a school this past week, and they were having a PPT, and that's exactly how they went about it. Okay, we're having the PPT, we understand that we will need an interpreter. We don't want the student to be the interpreter, but you work with the support team to ensure that someone is there to provide that translation for the family member.
I do have a couple questions.
Yeah, Ms. Boyd.
And excuse me for being late. Maybe it has been addressed, but I may have missed it. So this form is being completed by the FCSSP. But who would be doing in the box it says for office use only and referred to? So is this as a result of what is filled out is determined who is going to service that family?
Thank you, Ms. Brody. The form will be completed by the family member. That is what we're encouraging. Understanding that there may be family members that will need assistance in completing the form, and that's okay, but the premise is for the family member to complete the form. The FCSSP then has ownership of the form and how it moves through the school. The FCSSP then, where it says for office use only, would need to triage it along with their support team, and then would make the referral to, has it gone to the school social worker? Did it go to the behavior tech for follow-up? Did it go to the student engagement specialist for follow-up?
So are all the boxes that could be checked, all of those individuals are going to see the form and then decide? I'm trying to figure out who's deciding who's the person that this family needs to be referred to? It could be multiple people, but who's making that decision?
So the FCSSP, in collaboration with the school support structure, and those individuals here would determine, and on the prior slide, it just gave some examples of possible requests and who would be the owner of that particular request.
Because the only thing that's sticking out to me is that the FCSSP would possibly refer the family to themselves because they're listed.
And they should be. So depending on, and if you go back to the the support staff workflow, under the Family and Community Service Support Provider, if, say it was a basic need, many schools have a uniform closet that the FCSSP is responsible for. So if they're saying that, it's a basic need request, then the FCSSP would check off that box because they would be the one to go into the uniform closet, provide them with the uniform because that's their role and they're working within that capacity. But do understand your question that if FCSSP is listed, just making sure that they are not trying to take on other pieces.
It's something they should not be.
Completely understood, but the reference points and of course the examples that are here on the support staff workflow aren't all encompassing, but there were just some examples that we listed.
Okay, is there a protocol set place or something that, how do you know how many referrals are filtering through the schools? Like, is there a weekly check-in or?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
But it's possible that the Welcome Center gets something that also needs to be referred to the FCSSP.
correct.
So balancing how much they're getting from your office and how much they're just getting naturally from the school, just being at the school and being, a service to families, just trying to manage what they're receiving and what, they're responsible for.
No, and thank you. I think that's a great point. And as the office, as we bring our work really in alignment with each other, ensuring that all of our schools, our office is broken up, that all of the schools are in cohorts. So if something comes in through the Welcome Center, Judith and the team there, they know who to contact at that particular school as far as the FCSSP to ensure that, one, is there overlap, two, making sure that we aren't looking at duplicate requests. So, but no, it's an excellent point, and thank you for raising that, but that's something that, yes, we are looking at.
Okay, and every school has a school improvement plan? I don't know if that's a question for you. So every single school should have a school improvement plan?
So just something else that I thought about. I'm wondering if there should be reference here about whether or not the families has already interacted with the Welcome Center. Or perhaps that's just something that the FCSSP inquires about, but just so that we don't leave it up to chance.
Thank you.
And then a follow-up, which, gets to the data question. And I know that we're having conversations with each department about goal setting and the cascading goals. So it's something that we might want to think about in terms of what is the metric that we're going to identify in terms of the number of referrals, how to track it. Is there a specific goal? I know this is baseline year, but as you are working with your team, before it gets to our, conversation as to whether or not they're the right goals, consider thinking about what the baseline data measure would be.
I just have one more thing. So it is also possible that someone may call the Welcome Center. Are we encouraging them to call your school and start there?
So yes, last year we did create like a contact card for families, and that is always what we want families to do. We want them to go to their school first, and understanding that the Welcome Center is there if they have additional questions or concerns, or if they're new to the district and just coming in, of course, they'll go to the Welcome Center. But we want to build that rapport and relationship with the school community for our families. So we do encourage families to start with the school, but understanding that the Welcome Center is available if, for whatever reason, a family opts not to begin with the school.
Okay, and are you going to, maybe you have been even tracking that? Because before, it was not really a person at the school that really was a family person, but now that there is, families could still be contacting the Welcome Center, but just to track that, like we did get, an interaction with a family, but the referral was to, or not referral, but the recommendation was to contact the school to handle it, just to know how many are coming to you first and then going to the school.
And thank you. So I know Judith is able to speak to very clearly how many families, I don't know if you want to talk about that right now. Okay. Come on down, Judith.
Hello. Okay, so just to answer your question about the families that are still coming to the Welcome Center, what I'm doing, I'm redirecting. For example, if a family comes and say, I've been trying to reach the principal, that's usually their first line. I've been trying to reach the principal and I can't get in touch with the principal. I'll say to them, now your school now has a family support.
Just say I'm going to do my cheat.
Okay. And I will, inform them of that person's name. I will say that person is your liaison to get to the principal if you really need to speak with the principal, but that person may be able to assist you. So that's my referral back to the school. But if it's depending on the reason for their call, it may be something that I need to speak with the principal about on their behalf, and I can make that assessment. With regards to how many families we've seen, is that what you're asking, or?
No, because I know you guys do throughout the year, then you do a summary of the contacts, but now it would look a little different because,
Right.
So for that to change and for you to be able to capture that is, there is someone at the school, so your role is now different in how you may have tackled many things and handled many more things, but now there's someone at the school, just to be able to start capturing that data so we know who's coming to you and who's going.
Absolutely.
Referring to.
Absolutely. And I think both have a place, because to your point, Judith, that there are still times that families might feel most comfortable to start there, but I think the redirect is really, really important and very clearly tracking what stays with the Welcome Center and then what has been addressed at the school level. Thank you. Okay.
So I know that we're working with your office and the Office of Schools to draft the communication that's going to go out to staff about these specific roles. And so it's an opportunity for us to also share that information with our families. Even though we've sent communication to families about these these additional investments and how they're going to support, our students, might be an opportunity for us to send something more specific to families to speak to the roles and how families can interact and the purpose of the role.
Thank you. All right.
A question, does the family's support provider have a role in supporting PTOs or other organizations in the school? I know as part of your work, you report to us on what's happening with SDCs, and certainly PTOs are an important part of family engagement also. So is that part of the role or no?
It is part of the role. So the FCSSPs would be instrumental in working with school leadership and staff to get the information out about PTO meetings. Also, when it comes to the SGC elections, ensuring that that piece is done with fidelity. So they do serve a really intricate part in the PTO and SGC process.
Thank you. That's very important.
Thank you. Okay. So the next piece that I wanted to highlight is the work with our community schools. And I want to just give an update on that. So all schools are now community schools here in Hartford. So all schools. So we have 42 schools, and all of our schools are community schools using our tiered approach. And we have 2 new full-service community schools. So we've gone from having 7 to 2 new ones for a total of 9 full-service community schools. And we have 2 coordinating agencies working with those 2 full-service community schools that fall under Tier 4. And then also technical assistance is being provided for our schools to assist them with implementation of the community school strategy. So we know that the goal was to increase the number of community schools by 2022, and really just, again, partnering with our families and community organizations to provide that well-rounded education, those educational opportunities to support students in their school success. Of course, we understand that no 2 community schools are the same. They're not exactly alike, hence why we have to do a needs assessment and ensure that the need of the school is being addressed through the strategy. And really just building on a foundation of trust and respect as it relates to rethinking and rebuilding partnerships and relationships. And then, of course, collaborating with our families to get to that place of shared vision for the school. So the community school work across the district it's real, like it's happened, and really excited about how the work is being done in our schools. So I included this slide. I know you've seen it before, but just wanted to call our attention that, again, the majority of our schools live in Tier 2. And a lot of those schools are magnets in some of our neighborhood schools. And when you look at Tier 2, and all of our tiers, the tiers were done based on the State Department of Education, their accountability index. And so that's how we tiered our schools, tiers 1 through 4. Tier 1 schools, meaning that yes, they do receive supports, but then our Tier 4 schools receive the most supports based on the need of that particular school. So in the Office of Family and Community Partnerships, as I shared earlier, we've taken our schools and we've created cohorts. So the cohort that I have are all the middle schools and secondary schools. And we took those cohorts, divided up across the office, and as you can see on the handout that I shared with you, each individual has a certain grouping of schools, and this is just the Tier 2 schools. So there's a document like this for each of the tiers. These are just the Tier 2 schools. And so you can see that Tamara is supporting those 3 schools that are Tier 2 schools. And how is she supporting them? She's working directly with the FCSSP to ensure that the Tier 2 components that are listed on the bottom are actually being addressed. So ensuring that the needs assessment is going to be done, looking at the attendance strategies, ensuring that the family and community engagement is robust and happening in the school, the intentional community partnerships. So that is how the community school work is being actualized in our buildings. I chose Tier 2 for a couple of reasons. It's not a full service, it's not a Tier 4, but looking at Tier 2, understanding that they are receiving supports, but not the level of supports that a full service community school may have. So that is how we are actualizing the community school work, is through the FCSSPs, and that's why we intentionally included the community piece in their name, Family and Community Service Support Provider. Also, I wanted to share that our full service schools, those are schools that through their coordinating agency, they have a community school coordinator who is also a part of the work that we do. So we have implemented professional learning for the FCSSPs, and those community school coordinators are invited to be a part of that professional learning. So we've widen the network. So it includes the community school coordinators for our Tier 3 and Tier 4 schools, as well as the FCSSPs. So they're getting the same information at the same time. They're receiving the same tools to put in their toolkit to carry out the work in our schools using our community school design with a tiered approach. So just thought it was really important to include that slide so you can see how the schools are divvied up across the office. Many of our magnet schools live with Ms. Diaz. A lot of our elementary schools are between Carla and Tamara. And then all of our full-service community schools, Tier 3 and Tier 4, live with Huyshope Jones, who is the Community Schools Partnerships Manager. So just thought it was really, really important to share that with you. And there's a document, and I could share that with all of you if you want to see the full document. But for all the tiers, we have a document that looks like this that kind of helps us see how the community school strategy is being actualized in the district through the office.
Chip, can you speak to what is the component in Tier 2 that is different from Tier 1, or the components?
Okay, so all of our schools, so in Tier 2, I think the only component that is different is the higher ed partnership.
I wasn't sure which one was.
Okay, yes, it's the higher ed partnership. So all of the tiers have the assets and needs assessment, the attendance strategies, family and community engagement, the collaborative leadership practice, the higher ed partnerships. Excuse me, I stand corrected, Dr. Torres Rodriguez. It's the intentional community partnership.
Is that what it is?
That's what's different in Tier 2. So all of our tiers have standard components, but then as you move from Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4, they each have different pieces.
Do you have a document that you could share with us that shows what the components are for each tier?
Yes, I have no problem resending that again. I think actually it might be beneficial just to send this particular document for all 4 tiers so you can actually see it in alignment with the schools and who owns that.
Last time you had made a presentation on this, we were talking about a schedule on how we were going to implement, but you're saying that now all the schools have been implemented?
So the schedule was for the implementation of Tier 3 and Tier 4 schools. And so we have implemented with the 2 elementary school, well, it's not really elementary, it's a elementary and middle school. So Sands School and McDonough School are now online and going through their process. Sand is a little bit further along than McDonough. They both know who their coordinating agency is. And McDonough, I'll actually be going out to meet with them in the next couple of weeks to get them underway for their next steps.
The community schools director, is that a person on our staff or is it the partner agency?
So with our new frame for community schools, we refer to what was the community school director as the community school coordinator, because we actually have a community schools manager that works in our office. So just for clarity, we refer to them as community school, as a community school coordinator. And they are not staff of Hartford Public Schools. They are staff of the coordinating agency that's working in collaboration with our family community service support provider.
But the one that's under our umbrella is the manager.
Is the manager, yes, Huyshope Jones, yes.
And the coordinating agency will coordinate the community school even if there's other partners involved in there?
Yes, and that's why we in our frame, as we looked at the community school redesign, and the subtitle was Purposeful Partnerships, the reason and the rationale for that is the coordinating agency, their role is truly to coordinate. So we moved away from the term lead agency because we want the coordinating agency to understand the importance of lifting the already existing work that may be in a school, as well as looking at the scan of that particular zone and ensuring that the work is being leveraged. So no one agency should be providing all of the services in a school. They should be working with intentionality with other organizations and other partners.
Yes, Ms. Oliver?
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate the acceleration, if you will, of the timeline. All schools are community schools. I wanted to, I guess my feedback here is I'm a bit surprised at the spread across your entire department and quite honestly concerned regarding capacity. In particular for you and your role, in a leadership role. And I'm wondering if it's a conversation regarding resources we need to think through here as we move forward to do it with fidelity, this model, especially as we're moving through the tiers. I know there's a coordinating agency for some of our other tiers, so I'm just sitting here thinking about, wow, everyone on the team is assigned schools, plus we just went through the FCSSP, and we're going to talk about all the wonderful family engagement work that you guys are going to lift up and be awesome at this school year. So I just want to just acknowledge that as a concern I have, not because of your guys' skill set per se, just a capacity in the amount of time there is in a day to get this work done, quite honestly. I noticed that the other slide looked like it was kind of the older slide that we had been looking at before. So we see things like High School Link and JMA. I'm just thinking this is the same slide that was presented to us kind of as a refresher for us as we move forward. And one of the things you mentioned was like bringing the schools online. In particular, we don't have to talk about it tonight, but the high school model, I know that that's a different model for us in Hartford, and just wondering how that is going. But again, acknowledging that might be a whole different conversation for another time, so we don't have to do that tonight. So just acknowledging too, the configurations of those schools have changed or is changing and what impact that has had, et cetera. So, but again, I just encourage staff to make sure as the superintendent, therefore to us through the superintendent, aware of how the capacity is working out as we go through this model. Because again, we want this to be a powerful and effective model. And again, just having it spread across your entire staff is just a little bit of a orange flag for me. So thank you though. I do appreciate all the work that you guys have done here.
Thank you.
I think I'd like to echo my colleagues' concerns. I have always felt that if indeed family and community partnerships are a priority, that perhaps your area is a bit undersourced, and it's something that I think we need to talk about at some point.
Yes, and we can continue to explore and have those dialogues, especially, it's new work for us in terms of having every school staffed with an FCSSP and making sure that we norm the work, whereas we know that before, different schools leveraged the role differently, and some schools didn't have it. And so I think this is a year for us to really, just get to know the new way of work. That's one piece. And the other piece is, this is one of the reasons why when it comes to the high school model, and that we're not going to dive into that tonight, we were very intentional in saying, let's get Hartford High, our first students, support center, student success center, up and running and have at least a year under our belt before we can say, let's get another one, which is Weaver, right? Weaver is the other one that was identified because of the capacity issue and making sure that we're able to sustain some of the work. So all of it duly noted. And I anticipate you perhaps asking the same question in the next presentation that we have when Chief of Schools Avila speaks to the added arm, if you will, in her office around student engagement specialists. But I do appreciate the red, the orange, whatever color, all the color flags, because we struggle with how fast do we go, knowing that how urgent the work is and all of our priorities, right? It's critical feedback that I received the other day when someone said to me, well, the 4 priorities that you have, they're all priorities, so which one are you going to prioritize out of those? And so I hear you. I hear you. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so if there are no other questions, again, thank you. Just want to say thank you publicly to the team. Keishma has joined us. Keishma Jones, our community schools manager. Just publicly to the team, thank you for the work that they have been doing. This summer was a lot, trying to get a lot of this situated and lifted, and thank you for your support and your great feedback.
Thank you, Ms. Blackburn. This is very impressive.
Thank you.
Publicly acknowledging that it was a vision, right? So we can clap, right? The vision and staying true to it.
Thank you.
So now we shift to a culture and climate update. And Chief of Schools, Ms. Avila is going to lead us through the presentation and also speak to, whenever possible, as to Ms. Avila, the intersectionality, right, that exists between, thank you, between the FCSSPs and all the other complement in terms of the support staff.
Start.
And we wanted to specifically dive into the role of the student engagement specialist, which also was a significant investment that we are grateful for your approval for. And I know it's loading up, but if you have.
So, good evening, board members, and Dr. Torres Rodriguez. I'd like to start by introducing part of my team, and with the Assistant Directors of Student Engagement and Behavior Support, we have Candace Chester, we have Nikita Carroll Hall, and tonight we are fortunate to have 9 student engagement specialists to join us. So I'm really proud and happy that they're here to join us. Kimberly Gordon, who's at MD Fox Sanchez and SMSA. Dawn Chandler, who's at MLK. Shirami Barcelo is at Buckley. Isaiah Jacobs is at Weber and Rawson. Jelly Segura is at Burr. Vanessa Willis is at Burns Latino. Michael Savage is at Hartford High. Rosia Heredia and Elvin Reyes is at Dwight Belize. So I just wanted to welcome them and say thank you for coming tonight. We can clap for them. So through conversations with community members, parents, students, and staff, I realized we needed to fundamentally change the way our schools operated in order to ensure that all of our beautiful and capable students achieve. Our strategic operating plan has renewed our focus. And in doing that, the Office of School Leadership was reorganized somewhat, where the assistant directors of student engagement and behavior support became to be under my office, as well as the student engagement specialist, as well as Nicole Porter, who's in charge of athletics. And so they then became under my team. And so I just want to talk about the role of the student engagement specialist. Oh, the clicker's here. Sorry. And so initially, I have to tell you that we were going to call the role attendance specialist. And as we developed and started to think about the role more deeply, it wasn't just about attendance, that we really needed to support our schools with creating positive learning environments for the whole entire school community. And so it's not just about attendance, it's about really creating innovative places where students are just thriving to come to every single day, and our staff members are just really pouring out with supporting students with belonging. And so the role of the student engagement specialist is really to collaborate with the school-based attendance team is one of the areas that they focus on, support staff, families, and community-based agencies. And the real purpose is to re-engage students who are disengaged and disconnected from school, enhance engagement of students who are at risk of becoming disengaged and disconnected from school, improve the educational experience of students who are disengaged and disconnected, and improve learning outcomes of students who are disengaged and disconnected, improve the climate and culture, and provide service and resources that reduce risk of disengagement. And so we see disengagement. One of the side effects that we see is attendance, but a student can attend school and still be disengaged. And so the student engagement specialists are working with students who are in school, but also really trying to get students who are disengaged to be re-engaged and come to school. And so I wanted you to just get an idea of a sample schedule of their way of work, which I passed out. To really try to get an essence of what they do on a daily basis. And so if you see morning duty, you see the variety of things that they could be doing in the hallways. So for example, greeting students and families and making them feel welcome as they come, getting off the bus. And as they get off the bus, they might be able to see something that they may not see. They may see a student that may have a frown on their face and follow up and speak to them. You know, that might be one thing that they do. They walk in the hallways and encouraging students, oh, I'm so happy you're here, and going to class. They also meet families and conduct home visits. And those are some of the things that might happen in the morning. They will have part of their schedule where they're looking at data around culture and climate, early warning indicators, data around attendance, academic data. They might sit on data teams to really support and understand what's happening with students and looking at the data, looking for trends, because then they might follow up with a particular focus group of students if they look at particular data that they might want to follow up to find more information about. They will attend team meetings of climate and culture, attendance team, SRBI teams, so they will be part of those meetings. They will conduct outreach, not just home visits, but also outreach and really conducting research about what are the best resources in our community to support positive cultures. They will do inter-school visits to see best practices of other attendance teams. They will actually help teachers understand different preventions and interventions that can support students, as well as talk through the whole school around mentoring and supporting. We'll talk about mentoring a little later. And they will also provide professional learning for teachers during common planning time and as well as staff meetings. So some of the professional learning that the student engagement specialists have already experienced was they already had the opportunity to have a professional development sessions in August. They had 2.5 days in August, and they recently had 1 day last week. For the time being, we will be meeting with them every Thursday morning to build their capacity and developing a welcoming school environment, really addressing our no-show population and trying to get students that haven't shown up into school, engaging disengaged students. What does a disengaged student mean? What does that mean? So that we're having a common definition of a disengaged student. We've had some support from looking at data and some attendance reports, and what does that mean as far as teachers taking attendance and looking at other pieces of data from last year to this year and how students are doing, so to identify which students they're going to support. Effective attendance teams, what is an effective attendance? What does it look like, and how are they going to build the capacity of the attendance team? And then they will have later on this month talking about calibration of cultural learning walks, really looking at the school through the lens of the culture and walking through the building and saying, what areas do we need to improve on? around our culture, and giving that information to the Climate and Culture Committee so that they can begin to have an action plan to address specifically how to have a more positive environment. October through December, they will have professional development on restorative practices, protocols to visit classrooms, because they will go into classrooms and have gone into classrooms to see what's happening in the classroom around students. Staff consultation and mentoring and coaching staff around intervention practices that can be conducted. Equity matters, maintaining a positive school culture and fostering student voice, and facilitating focus groups with students and staff that they will also have. How do you do that, and what to do with that data and that information. So I'm going to stop there to ask any questions, and then I will continue.
Yeah, well, I'm sort of stuck on the word engagement. What strategies, how do we engage kids? I mean, being the parent of a child who was very disengaged in high school, I know that telling them you need to go to class is not enough.
No, so the very first thing is having a relationship with the students, right, to really help to understand what's going on with that particular student, or just getting to know students, right? So similar to when I go and visit schools, I walk with the students in class and we have a conversation before we go to class. So it's not about just go to class, it's about how are you doing today, where are you heading, tell me things that you like, having a conversation about who they are as a person and helping them feel that they matter. And it matters that they are there today and that they are welcomed and feel a sense of belonging is what happens about going to class, right? Or why don't you want to go in class is important as well. And having that information so that they can then begin to, whether they relay that to the teacher, whether they see trends and have to relay that to a social worker, depending where that information goes. That's just an important piece of information as understanding why they do want to go and why they don't want to go.
Solomon?
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Avila. So this is a really exciting piece for people who don't know me well. This is part of what my work is, disengaged and disconnected young people. So I think this is fabulous. But I do want to better understand. So is there a student engagement specialist in every school? Okay.
We're gonna get to that. You want me to go there now?
Well, and I guess while you're doing that, or maybe have a question about this, obviously it looks very different in elementary school than it might look in middle to high school too. So and also where a young person is in terms of, I will say the spectrum of engagement or disengagement, right? That looks very different. And one of the things I appreciate you said earlier was the need for collaboration with staff, family, and community providers. And I think that really helps to allow for that. But I'm just kind of thinking through, obviously it would be great if every single school had one of these to be able to really get to know that culture, those students in particular. But I'm just wondering, the approach. So it sounds like it's coming up, so I'll wait on that response and let other people ask questions first.
Okay.
Ms. Brody?
I don't have a question, because I was wondering the same thing, but I went to the next slide and figured that out. But I love this work. Like, this is, I think me and Kim are very excited. This is so important that I can't even express it enough in words. Because when you see that person in the school that's able to connect to a student that nobody can, and know them and can support them, they know they can do. This is very important work, and I think this will definitely get us to where we need to go. But this is a very important role in our schools. So I'm very excited about it.
Thank you. I'm going to move to, okay. So I want to move us to restorative practices. and just want to give a little history of where we've been and where we're going, right? And so, since 2016, we have had 24 schools have had training. Here is the cohorts. In cohort 1, you can see that the schools that were provided training, all the way to cohort 5. So we've done some restructuring and understanding that we have to build our capacity internally to continue to support all of our schools becoming restorative schools, right? And that by just having outside support, it's not maintained, right? It will not be sustainable to continue to have that. So building our internal support, the assistant directors of student engagement and behavior support have already started their training to be certified in providing professional development for restorative practices. They received 1 session of training the end of August, and they will have their second set of training in the end of October, which will allow them to train the members of our district. How that will look, I also have uncovered that we have some certified administrators who have already had certified training in restorative practices, and they will train so we can calibrate with the certified administrators and the student engagement specialists. They will train them first so that they will then train school staff. We will have family workshops to really help families understand what is this restorative practices everyone's talking about and how can I support restorative practices. And they will also train students, right? So students is part of engaging in that restorative practices. One of I think the biggest changes is that they will be in the school and have hands-on approaches around the restorative practices as opposed to having being pulled outside of the school, going to the training, going back to the school, where student engagement specialists and the assistant directors will have the opportunity to provide more support by being at the building level, being in the building and seeing what happens and providing more in-depth support. But before we do that, we are going to really assess the status of the implementation that has previously happened, as well as looking forward to where people are at. So the school will conduct a school self-assessment, and this will happen the 3rd week of September and go to October. They will conduct focus groups so that we can understand how restorative practices are implemented in that particular building and buildings. The cultural learning walks will give us information around restorative practices, and then there will be a needs assessment. After that is conducted, then there will be differentiation around professional learning. So some schools might just need some refresher information. Other schools might need to have a more in-depth professional learning around conversations on how to repair harm. Other schools might just need some refinement around circles. So depending what the need is, the professional development will be differentiated to support and build the capacity to each school. And then we will also provide the professional learning that's necessary for new schools.
Ms. Avila, so I know Ms. Oliver asked the question as to is this role, or how many?
Oh, you want me to do that?
How many? And I know that the details are not in the PowerPoint, and we can send those. Oh, there are.
I think we added it. There we go.
Okay, yes.
Okay, so not in our,
No, it's not, there's
Okay,
2 slides that
I
are
see.
not, but we added it and they
Great.
will be provided for you. So there are a total of 17 student engagement specialists, and the breakdown is of the following. It was based on the number of chronic absentee, the percentage of chronic absentee in each school. So the schools that had the higher need had got more support. So there are 13 school-based, 13 school-based student engagement specialists, and there are 3 district student engagement specialists. They do not stay at the district. The reason why they're called district is because they will float around to different schools based on need, as opposed to being maintained in one school. So if you see on the left-hand side, you'll see the allocations per school, and then on the right-hand side, you will see that there are, the one from Burr is from a SIG grant, and they have decided to add that one themselves, so that is a SIG-based grant. That's why there is 17 in our budget. There are 16 allocations, and the 17th one is from Burr because of a SIG grant. There is one district SES that goes to Weaver and Wasson, and then there's one that goes to Fox, SMSA and Sanchez, and then we still have one vacancy that we need to fill, and that one will also go to different schools. What will happen as we monitor the data, they will go where it's best needed, right? So their locations will change, and even the ones that are at the school level right now. So let's say, for example, MLK no longer needed the extra support, then they will have support, but it wouldn't be as intense as it is right now. So that we are using the resources equitably to really address the needs at each individual school.
Just a reminder, to our budget days, we had identified 36 student engagement specialists initially. If we think about the formula that we had in mind, right, we talked about one student for every 100, one SES for every 125 chronically absent students in each school, for schools that had 25% or more chronically absent students. And so, when we did the calculation, in order to stay true to that specific formula, we would have required 36 SESs. However, we had to, as part of the mitigations, reduce by 20, leaving us with 16, 17. Well, 17 because of the SIG grant.
Right. And so each school will eventually be touched by an SES, but again, the amount, because we always feel that they can always need support to better our school cultures, but the amount of time they will have will really be determining on the need of the school.
You've mentioned a few times the one at Burrs because of the SIG grant. I could easily see this becoming an essential staff position. So is that because of the principal at Burr decided this was important enough that we're going to use, I forget how we were doing the formula, but the money the principal had to do this position? So, okay, you're nodding your head, so you're answering that question. So is the expectation still, though, that it will keep, like you created this model of what an SES is, what exactly they do, what their responsibilities are, et cetera, and I would assume that that means that one of this now total 17 still lines up with the overall vision across the district.
Yes, so that one participates in all of the professional development. It is still under the supervision of the office. It's just the funding is somewhere else.
So then it's also possible that other principals could do something similar. Okay, so the reason I'm saying this is because I know I'm not an educator by trade, but if I got my climate in my engagement to a certain level and I felt that was because I had an effective SES, I probably would not want to lose that SES, even though the data, and I love data, so completely get it, the data suggests the SES should now move to another school. I know if I were a principal, I'd be like, well, no, I don't want to lose you. And so I do not imagine that any of these schools are going to want to lose these SESs. Thus not to put words in your mouth, Superintendent, but why you said, oh, this may be another question that will come up in the next portion of this, because if this works, then it's probably one of those things that should just be in every school, right? Okay. And for a point of clarification, earlier you talked a little bit about training and training being at the school level. So it looks like we're doing some of the training with restorative practices a bit differently, so they would be at the school level. So I just want to make sure I understood. So will the SES, I know we were talking about people who are certified and that, but will they be responsible for ensuring that training at the school level, like you were saying, kind of the trainings there and versus pulling people out and all of that?
Not solely, but in collaboration with the assistant directors, so they will be doing portions of it, but the assistant directors will also be responsible to provide the professional learning.
And ask about this professional learning on restorative practices specifically. You spoke in terms of schools. My experience as a parent and going through schools is that within the schools there can be differing opinions and thoughts about what restorative practices is among the staff. Would you be able to say, identify specific staff members who need more training than others?
So that's part of the assessment that we want to do around implementation and how it's being implemented. And though the purpose, as we have focus groups as well as the cultural work, we should identify some of those things and then conversations with the administration so that we can differentiate if some people need some further support than others, that we provide it.
Just want to ask that you highlight the through line between the district attendance team and the intersection between the family and community support providers, the SESs, and the BTs. I know that you have this matrix here from the first presentation, but if you can just see if you can make a through line between the district attendance team and then how it kind of aligns to their respective buckets of work.
Okay. So I can give an actual example that happened, that started last week. So the district attendance team meets every other week. We meet twice a month. And what we did is, one of the things that we did is look at our attendance rates as well as how many students were not coming to school. We reviewed our attendance guidelines and really talked about the procedures on ways that we can help students come to school and get to know where students are. So for example, day 3 is a day that teachers call home, and then there's, day 4 is letters. We reviewed that with the SCSs the day right after the district attendance team, because the district attendance team had talked about what is it that we need for each school to really support the schools. And it was an opportunity for the SESs then to go back and, one, help highlight what was needed with the attendance team. The family community support providers are on the attendance team as well. So they had the opportunity, and then the idea is that the attendance team really looks at the data and have a conversation of how do we address the needs of the schools. Looking at that, do I think that this group of students, we should have the family community support service provider call those particular students, and this is why? Versus the social worker might need to call because we know last year something happened that required that maybe the social worker should take care of these students because that is the need there, so that they can really begin to identify, and collectively they are differentiating their interventions on what is to happen. So they're all sitting on the team, they're doing different things based on their roles as well as the need of the school. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, Dr. Torres Rodriguez.
Just wanted the tangible, because I know that initially when we were, having the budget conversations internally, the interfacing conversations as to, will there be similarities in these roles, and how do we avoid those, right? There's the inefficiency, but at the same time, how do we not risk that everyone works in silos? And so just wanted you to capture it as this starts at the district level with the district attendance team.
So another way to think about that, so what you have in front of you is the 4 positions that really support the level of support of students. So you have, some examples of what a behavior tech does, what a student engagement specialist, what a social worker, how the social worker supports the student, and how the family, the FCSSP supports. So if you think about it, as the student engagement, as we were talking about the hallway, for example, and they begin to see a pattern, or they begin to see a trend, or they have an understanding around a disengagement student, really trying to understand what support is needed for that particular either group of students or that student. Is it something that maybe do we feel that a group should happen, maybe a small group with a social worker? Or do we feel that we should have the family community support provider give a call home because something else is going on? So the student engagement specialist helps and reaches out to which is needed for those particular students. When they talk at attendance teams and climate and culture teams, then they talk about how each person of the puzzle is coming together to support the school climate and culture of that building. So they have particular roles. And so they're different, they do overlap, right? They do overlap and they do intersect.
And just one more, because it makes me think about the question that Ms. Brody asked earlier about the data piece.
Mhm.
And so, I know that we'll be doing the same work in terms of rolling up the goals that each of the SCSs identify that will then align to your office goals that will then align to our major goals.
So again, I'm really pleased with the direction we're going. Talk to me a little bit about youth voice, though, right? So we also talked about how it could look different from what grade or what school level they're at. But I'm also thinking about, as a student engagement specialist, gets to know the students, et cetera, but how is also they're working to do the student voice piece of it? Because we know when we talk about disengaged young people, that usually becomes a component of that conversation.
Right. So they will have, part of their schedule will be to work with groups of students that they feel that they're disengaged and giving them voice. And so some of it might be part of student government, some of it might be around a particular project that the students would want to create. Some of it might be around a need that the students have. So the student voice and the groups will be identified by the disengaged students. But once they have the group of students, it will be to elevate that voice on how they can create something or be part of the school community to elevate their voice. I'm sure students will be able to identify something that they would collectively like to work on and to empower them to share their voice, to add to that community and to be productive. And that achievement of really being an equal contributor to that community will, I believe, get them more engaged than they have been previously. So we're not going to say they're going to do this. We're going to hear from the students about what they would like to contribute, and the SCSs will help them cultivate that. Okay. All right, so I want to move to attendance. Go to the right slide. It's moving slower than that. Okay. So I just want to talk a little bit about data around our attendance, out-of-school suspension and in-school suspensions. And so this table displays suspension and expulsions for 2017 and 18 and 2018 and 19. And the total incidents are down from 157 in total. ISSs increased 192, but OSSs decreased 335. And that does happen at times when we are focusing on decreasing, having students leave our building and have to be out, suspended outside. We keep them inside. And so you do see sometimes that happens with increasing in-school suspensions. There were 14 fewer expulsions last year. No suspensions in pre-K. No expulsions occurred in pre-K through 5 at all in this past current year.
Quick question on
Yes.
Did the law change in regards to that or not, or at the state level, did something change that to make it that? I was at another meeting. So can we no longer expel certain students? That's why we're seeing 0 at certain ages, at the younger ages.
So there are extreme cases where the state would say it's okay to expel. So it does not say that you cannot at all, but there are extreme cases where something happens, right? That would allow for a student to be expelled. So to answer that question.
I think maybe I didn't say it right.
Okay.
So in 2000, as far as like state statute, did the statute change and we cannot, like did it, what we can expel them for, did that drastically change for certain age groups?
So there was a focus of not suspending students lower than second grade, right? Second grade and lower. So there was an emphasis about not doing that. However, it didn't say you could not totally do it, right? And so in previous years, we have had some suspensions in the lower grades. And this past year, we didn't. So there was an ask, not a mandate that you couldn't.
Okay, when I find out what it is, I'll bring it to your attention.
Okay.
I was invited, not as a board member, but as being a member of the NAACP, to be a part of the State Board of Education, of how they deal with who's being suspended and why, and looking at the race of kids and seeing our kids of color being suspended and expelled at higher rates. I would encourage for Hartford to be at the table, because they were trying to ask me questions and I was like, I'm not fighting that. Because they were questioning what we're doing. So they're curious as to what Hartford is doing in regards to our restorative practices and how that is working out for us. But I would encourage Hartford to be at the table, because there's many districts, there's many agencies that are having this conversation around the suspensions and expulsions. And I just think our voice is not in that room. And it's like a collaborative. And they were asking me questions, but I was like, I'm not here in that role. But I think it is valuable for us to be a part of that collaborative.
So we can look into that. I know that we have Charlene Russell Tucker. I don't know if who the contact person of the state is that facilitates that.
I mean, at the time, the commissioner was a part of one meeting. Board members at the State Board of Education was at the meeting. Some meetings are smaller than others. There are attorneys that are really digging through the data. Like, it's a lot of different, it's not just one sector of, it's educators, it's education consultants, it's school districts. They're representing their school district and they're going through the data. I could get you the person that reached out to me and you can.
That'd be great. And to also add that, so we have our monitoring advisory group. If y'all remember, that was a structure that we implemented as part of our response to the Office of the Child Advocate report. And as part of that group, we do have external partners / experts. And so Charlene Russell Tucker from the State Department of Education sits in that meeting, and we review some of this data. And she has, I believe, referenced that structure that you're talking about. So please share the information with us. I know that there are lots of people that want to know, what we're doing as it relates to the attendance work, which, as we all know, is directly connected to our suspension and our exclusionary practices. So
I just want to add. So Yeah, we should talk about more of this offline. So per federal law, the JJDPA, we are actually participating as part of the Disproportionate Minority Contact, which is now called RED, the Racial Ethnic Disparities Group. That's per law. I'm the co-chair for Hartford, along with Martha Stone, who's my co-chair. And it's exactly that. We meet quarterly and we go through all of this data. We break it down, de-aggregate it. We're required to do that and then come up with these wonderful strategies and get to beg Abby and Charlene and Dr. Sellers and so many other folks about what's going on and what's different. In fact, I have some follow-up items I need to talk to the superintendent about. So I think there's also a group that's been doing some work around guidance. Because from an early childhood perspective, this has been a huge issue, as you can imagine. So I'm saying we probably should just touch base behind the scenes. But yeah, per federal law, Hartford is participating. And there's a roundtable, exactly what you said, cross-agency, cross-sector, where we have the judge at the table, we have public defenders at the table, we have the school districts, we have some providers, we have, it's a lot of wonderful legal terms that, hey, I didn't know all existed, but including police and just others that have this dynamic roundtable to really talk through these things. So I would invite anyone who's interested. They're called the RED meetings, and again, that's racial and ethnic disparities in Hartford, and I think our next one is next month. I can't tell you exactly at this moment what our date is, but I can always get that information to you. But I think behind the scenes connecting this so that we have a aligned conversation versus these separate tables will probably be helpful.
Thank you.
And I'm a member of Hartford's Commission on LGBTQ plus affairs. And I've also in the past been a mentor with True Colors, which works with youth of sexual minorities. And this is a group that is at very high risk of dropping out of school, of being homeless and so forth. And we actually drafted a letter yesterday coming to the superintendent asking about services and supports that we might provide, but could you speak to that?
Around services that are provided, or?
Yes, generally they're not considered a minority group, but they really are an at-risk group. So is that an issue that we address?
So I do think it's addressed by need, and I think it's addressed, under the circumstances, I would say mostly at the school level with social workers or school counselors, if there's a particular need. I think it depends what the need is, right? And so it's hard for me to answer that question if you tell me what the need is. If I know that at some high schools they have certain clubs, so it depends what the need is. If it's inclusiveness, right, then that may not necessarily need to go to a social worker, right? It needs to go into how do we welcome all students, right? So that's something different. So what? Exactly. So there could be bullying, there could be bias, there could be a lot of things that happen under those circumstances. So is there something specific that we have just for that group of students? Not at the moment. So it's an area of need.
Thank you.
So you spoke about GS, I mean, when you're talking about groups, we have some schools that have
What I formerly knew of GSAs, Gay Straight Alliances. I know that there are different names now throughout the schools.
Right. Exactly.
And then we know that, safe spaces is something that we encourage everyone to communicate. But is there a universal systematic approach?
No.
No, which, as we, through our shared governance, look at, policy and operationalizing some of that work around equity and inclusion. Mm-hmm. These are all moves that we seek to make, and your leadership around policy is very important there.
And my concern basically is they not be invisible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Agreed.
I believe in policy. We started, we addressed that, like when we looked at policy, I don't know. I remember I don't remember which policy it was, but I know we were sensitive to that, and we incorporated it in the policy committee.
Recently?
Yes, Dr. Matos, we were careful around that language. I can't call the policy, but we did,
Yeah, and
as we're addressing policy.
To
we're taking
revise.
Yes,
Okay,
we're taking
yeah.
that to account.
as I think about, right, how what are the regulations and how we operationalize, I think we've not gotten to that far into it, as to what that looks like and what those specific structures should be in our schools. But it is work, right, when we talk about one of our values and beliefs of inclusion, right? So that means that it's all, specifically, right, and all groups, so. I look forward to reading the letter.
I think it was a bullying policy.
Bullying?
So to Ms. Oliver's point and Ms. Brody's point around suspension and expulsions by student group, this table identifies data from 2017 and 18 and 2018 and 19 by student group. And so the highest in-school suspension rates are non-English language learners and Hartford residents, and non-disabled students was the highest in-school suspensions. There were increases in the non-English language learners, female students by 185 incidents, not students with disabilities, and non-residents were the increases in students of color. And the highest out-of-school suspension reductions were resident students by 362 students and non-Ls of 308 students, and those were reductions in out-of-school suspensions. Hispanic males was reduced by 221, and students without disabilities were 219 in reduction. So I'm going to move us to looking at our overall attendance and some points in attendance. So our average for 2018-19, our average daily attendance rate was 90.8. Our chronic absentee rate was 25.3. Students chronically absent, the number of students that were chronically absent were 4,590. Students currently at risk for becoming absent at this moment is 6,583, and 7 schools are in the satisfactory chronic absenteeism range, and 12 schools are critically chronically absenteeism range. And if we look at the changes that happened last year in regard to attendance, that we see that in 7th grade that and 4th grade that there were, in 3rd grade and 4th grade and as well as 8th grade there were some decreases in attendance, chronic absenteeism, as well as some other grades that made some changes in decreasing. So one of the strategies that was a district-wide strategy was our mentoring program, and this is also a slide that needs to be given to you. As the district data team decided that we needed a district-wide strategy for the entire district, and the district strategy was having mentors at the school level, which aligns to having a caring adult, right? And so each school was asked to have 10 mentors. The original target was about 400 students that we wanted to serve. So of course they could have more than 10 mentors, but we asked for a minimum of 10 mentors. where teachers or staff members were actually engaging with students that they were not used to engage, not their classroom, but other students, right? That they were engaging, not the ones in the particular classroom that they had. In turn, we had over 1,000 students who had mentors. And the number of chronically absent students before the mentoring program, that they were, because they had to pick particular students. We narrowed our focus of students who were almost going to be chronically absent or were just chronically absent. We started in March. So this year we're starting early. We're actually starting this month. But last year we started in March. It was in collaboration with the Work with Attendance Works, right? And so the ask was, I'm excited the fact that the ask was for 400 students, and we had over 1,333 students that had a mentor that they met with regularly. So 567 when we chose the students were already chronically absent. They did have the opportunity to recover, which is really important and not always easy to do. Students at risk were 422, and students who were moderately chronically absent was 479. Those were the type of students that were chosen. What we were able to do was we were able to prevent 373 students who were at risk of becoming chronically absent, so they did not become chronically absent, and 168 students were recovered by the end of the year. So it means that they were chronically absent at that time, but then they recovered and they were no longer considered chronically absent. We also tracked the type of interventions. We offered several different types of interventions, but we tracked the ones that were most successful and most impactful. So the data showed that the individual student meetings with mentors was the most impactful one, and attendance and incentives for recognizing that they changed and came to school more frequently. Those were the two highest impact interventions, and the ones that were least impactful were phone calls to families, group meetings with mentors. So students, even though they met in group, they preferred one-on-one attention. That's what the data showed us, right? So they did have lunch bunch, for example, was one of the interventions that were offered, and students shared, well, I'd rather have one-on-one lunches, and so that was a good data point so that we could share with the mentors. And the district attendance team looked at the interventions and then gave feedback to the principals to share at the school level of what interventions were showing the most gains for our students. So we used that data at the district attendance team. And then there were some others that were less impactful as well. And so we're using this data to help us strengthen the mentoring program for this coming year.
So going back to the previous slide, and I'm trying to, so this is great, the attendance mentors. I think that was great information.
This one?
I'm going back, oh, maybe it's the one before that, actually. The one with the distribution, yes.
Okay.
So there's 7 schools that have, I mean, the way I'm reading this is, there's 7 schools that have greater than 50% of their students as chronically absent by the end of 18-19. Is that fair to say? All the way on the other end, right, in the black bar?
Oh, you mean the black one?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we, and I know we've talked about this a little bit before, because I think, for example, Opportunity Academy, which follows an alternative model, you know, in order to get the credit for the graduation for SCD definition, you have to also acknowledge the SCE definition as it relates to chronic absenteeism. But I'm thinking about, like, what are we doing with those 7, right? I mean, there's obviously more other ones, but this is a really not great number over there. So is there, like, improvement plan? I know we talked about school improvement plans before, and every school has an improvement plan, but could you also just talk a little bit about that? Because when we see, I think it's some other great work that you're pointing out, but when I see 7, you know, schools, and I don't know if it's, like, again, if it's schools that have more alternative models, like the New Visions of the world, like, but I just am wondering, what are we doing, or what are you guys doing as a team to really address those 7 schools?
So some of those 7 schools consist of who have more than one SES. Okay, as well as we had a meeting this past week already that supported the schools. So though we talk about attendance and strategies to support attendance in every admin institute, and we had one today, but we had a meeting, just a small group meeting for the particular schools that we had yesterday, that really focused on what are the actions that they are putting into place to really start now. Actually, we started in our August Admin Institute, where we help schools already prepare for their first attendance meeting and to make outreach for students who were chronically absent last year. I'll give you an example. One school principal said today that she called up on the very first absence of a student who was chronically absent and said, I know you had some difficulties last year. How can we support you right now? And the parents said, well, I've only been out one day. She says, I know, but we're going to start right away to support you immediately. So tell us what you need, right? And so today, this afternoon, was a sharing, not just with those 7 schools, but what all of the principals today were sharing strategies that they were going to use now, as well as being this is Attendance Awareness Month. What are they doing especially this month in your schools to promote attendance? And so there was a sharing of strategies this afternoon, as well as the concentrated effort on those particular schools. Additionally, the assistant directors of student engagement and behavior support pay closer attention to those schools and provide more support so that they can elevate those particular schools to a different place.
I just want to also remind us that internally we're having the conversation again to potentially, identify funds to have I'm trying to remember what the satellite, for lack of a better word, program that we had at New Visions. I know that was highly successful for a 20-some-odd student, and so we're strongly considering that. Again, this year, it is not, Ms. Oliver, school-specific, but it is, it draws, if you will, from various schools. And as I think about it as we look at the continuum and the tiers, this would be potentially a step before a student would be, for example, referred out to, Opportunity, or, our partners at Opportunity. As another strategy, but that is systematic across all schools. We're not there yet.
We've been focusing on attendance, but certainly there are students who come to school every day but don't turn in their work, don't do their work, are totally disengaged. Mm-hmm. Do we have similar strategies for them?
Absolutely. So one of the conversations is around, the sense of feeling good about coming to school, and what does that mean, and what does that look like? So today, for example, at the Admin Institute, we talked about having high expectations, and that was one of the focus areas, and how students feel really excited about when they are held to high expectations, because of what it means is that we believe in you. We know that you can do that. So one of the conversations today was focusing, how do we have high expectations for all students? And how do you support that? And how does that look at the building level as we attend to students who may struggle? So they may not do their homework because something else is there, right? So not making the assumption that they don't want to do their homework, but what's going on around why they're not doing their homework, and having those type of conversations with students so that we can get to the root cause of what is it that the student needs. Is it meaningful? Is it too difficult? Do they not have a location? Like, what is happening around? So having opportunities for students to have, depending on the grade level, but having opportunities to have students to either get more support or a location or a different time is an example of one strategy, so that they can feel successful and have an opportunity other than at home to do the homework, but maybe in school with a different teacher during a different period that they might be free. Any other questions? Well, I do want to just say that I'd just like to thank the board for the opportunity and the investment that you have made in the student engagement specialists and the assistant directors. As Ms. Brody said, and Ms. Oliver and Mr. Flores, we are all very excited about the opportunity of having this investment. We really believe that this will support all of our students, and so we're just thrilled to have this opportunity. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And just to remind us that next level of work for us, so at the school level, for example, today, the Administrators Institute, the core of the work was around targets and student learning objectives, which is part of how we measure our progress. And so schools are doing that work, followed by what we at the central office are doing also in terms of our departmental goals that will then inform a district scorecard, which will be informed by the work that you all are doing as a board around the vision for the district. So lots of parallel work and effort to align not only the strategies, but also our outcomes. And ideally, the next level of work after all of that is that in addition to the district scorecard, we continue to be more transparent about the way of work and the impact that we are having or not, in a way that is transparent and that allows all of our constituents to understand what it is that we're doing and the improvements that we want to do, which means that ultimately schools will also have a scorecard. So all of this, right, is foundational to where we ultimately want to go. So kudos to the team, but also thank you for your support and your leadership around resource allocation.
And, well, thank you, Ms. Avila, Ms. Blackburn. This, I think, was a very exciting workshop, I believe. And we know that all of you have been doing very exciting work, but it's especially rewarding when we're talking about direct service delivery, because after all, it's the kids, the reason that we're all here. Yeah. Thank you, and good evening, good night.
Good night.